Thank you for joining us today. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are joining us from. We have a 2-question poll just to get a sense of kind of who's here in the room. So please feel free to fill that out. This is the Partnership for Public Services 4th Author Talks event. My name is Emma Shirato-Allman. I'm an associate manager at the partnership and have the immense pleasure to be speaking with Marina, Nitze and Nick Sinai, the authors of the soon-to-be released book, Hack Your Bureaucracy, Get Things Done No Matter What Your Role on Any Team. Before introducing our speakers, just a few housekeeping notes. We invite you to use the Zoom chat function, which should now be enabled, to communicate with panelists and your fellow audience members. If you have questions at any point in the conversation, please throw them up in the Q&A feature, but if you put them in the chat as well, we will make sure to find them and make sure that they are answered. And so with that said, I will go ahead and introduce our speakers. So we have Marina Nitze joining us, foster care reformist who serves on the advisory board for Foster America, an IT crisis consultant and partner at Layer Olive, and a fellow for New America's New Practice Lab. She previously served as the Chief Technology Officer at the Department of Veterans Affairs and was a White House Senior Advisor on Technology under the Obama administration. Welcome, thank you for being here, Marina. And secondly, we have Nick Sinai, a self-described wonk, adjunct and senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School and senior advisor for a venture capital and private equity firm, Insight Partners. He served as the White House Deputy Chief Technology Officer. And here we are to discuss their first book together, Hack Your Bureaucracy, which will be releasing on September 13th, 2022. Thanks for throwing up the beautiful cover. It is a galvanizing collection of over 50 tactics paired with case studies across sectors, organizations of various sizes and scopes, and transcending many individual stations. So let's get started. I will go ahead and end our poll. For those who want to know, we are about half federal employees, people also coming in with contracting and consulting or working at other levels of government. And then we see a wide array of roles from data management and analysis, IT, legal policy, program, project, and product management. Really excited to get all of those perspectives when we go to the Q&A portion of our conversation today. But to open up the conversation and provide some context for the book's contents that we are just chomping at the bits, excited for, can each of you share a standout tactic from the book and the accompanying example that goes with it?
Sure, I'll go first. Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm excited to have you here. One tactic that I've found really, really effective is showing the numbers. You'd be surprised sometimes in a bureaucracy that they may not be measuring something that could make a real argument change. And one of my favorite examples here is my friend, Dr. Lucia Coulter, who believed that children were dying and suffering from lead poisoning in Malawi. And most people said, well, that can't be true. Lead paint, that was solved 40, 50 years ago. That's not a problem here anymore. And so in order to make her argument, she went to the paint store in Malawi, bought a few cans of paint for, $40 and had them tested. And they all had astronomical levels of lead paint. And in response to that, the government developed a lead paint policy within months because they had just never seen the data before and they weren't aware of what a problem it was. So this won't work in every environment, but I'd certainly encourage you, if you're trying to make an argument, see what kind of data exists to help make your argument. And if it doesn't exist, try to collect it. Nick?
One of my favorite tactics is write a one-pager. I said it so many times that I think Marina, when we worked together, got tired of me saying it. But I think it's really powerful. If whatever change you want to see, whether it's policy, initiative, project, whatever you're trying to get done, if you can write that down as a one-pager, it's harder than it sounds. Writing something down like that forces you to question your assumptions, pick the single best anecdote or statistic that illuminates the problem. Forces you to write the bottom line up front. It forces you to have a catchy name when we were working on the education Connect Ed initiative for getting broadband to schools, the one pager that I wrote and was workshopping was called Gigs for Kids. And so the other thing about crystallizing your writing and your assumptions and seeing where you're weak logically and trying to go fix that or learn more is it's also a great tool to start to build support. And the more that you can start to shop that one pager with colleagues and get feedback and incorporate their feedback, it shows that you're listening. So I'm a big fan of whatever you're trying to do. You know, talk is cheap. We all kind of have a little bit different conceptions about what the thing is, but if you write it down into a single pager, that brevity, I'm a big fan of multi-page memos as well, but a single page memo is really powerful.
Yeah, I've definitely found there's a lot of success in being succinct. And going back to Marina, the example that you shared of that case in Malawi, that was kind of a solution coming out of an undiagnosed, unrecognized problem. And so just from the excerpt that we were privileged to be able to see, you know, there were already some standout available and approachable solutions to otherwise undiagnosed problems. You know, adding barcodes to physical folders, applying e-signatures, rooting out the use of literal carbon copy paper, which I can say I don't think I've seen in my lifetime. So I appreciate that your book showcases those. Are there other like minor headaches that just seem to be endemic to government processes that can easily be resolved?
Yeah, I would say the tactic of looking between the silos is one that works over and over and over and over again, no matter if I'm at a private commercial client, if I'm in the federal government, if I'm in a state government. And it's because people are blind to the handoffs. People understand how their area works. They'll often defend very hard how their area works, but they often don't see what happens to what they do downstream. And they often don't know how they got what they get from upstream. And because the handoffs are not really defended or well understood, they're usually rife with opportunity. Whether it's the literal handoff, like making it electronic instead of paper, or moving off of, you know, carbon copy triplicate paper, perhaps to an email, or the data flow, understanding that, aha, we could avoid this entire transformation process or this entire manual entry process here if we better understood how the data you're collecting at step 1 is actually used in step 7. A thing I find over and over is that we're able to eliminate questions on forms, right? Forms is a big way that people interact with government and agencies of all sizes. So looking for ways to capture that information more precisely to serve the need that you have downstream can really help there.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for pointing out some audio. I think we have Nick joining us, newly AirPodded in. Do you have, you know, something that you'd like to share when it comes to these seemingly small, but actually very significant kind of solutions? Sorry, can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Sorry for the audio challenges here. So the question was about small versus large changes.
Yeah, how to kind of, for problems that we don't know, like kind of that are there, like that have relatively quick and easy fixes, are there ones that we should still be rooting out, whether it's in government or really anywhere?
Yeah, I tend to think of bureaucracies in any organization of size as opportunities to make continuous improvements. And so, I mean, if you think about the world 50 years from now or 100 years from now, it's going to be different. And so we're going to have to change how we do things. And if you just say, well, what about in 10 years? Or what about in 1 year? And so how do you make the small changes or make sure that the processes that seem so inflexible can actually continue to adapt? And we have some great examples. I think one of the ones that we talk about in the book with Marina is the idea of a browser at the VA. And there used to be a policy about a specific browser that you could use, but because it was very prescriptive, it meant that very few veterans could actually apply for healthcare. And in the process of fixing that, she also made it more flexible. So, organizations need to change as the needs of their employees and the needs of their stakeholders and customers change, and as technology changes, right? Frankly, and the society changes. And so it's can you make those small changes while you are planning for the bigger things? Because sometimes we get stuck in these kind of multi-year digital transformation, business transformation, these big bang kinds of projects that often don't work or only work partially. And so the question is, can you find those pieces of things to show real momentum while you're still contributing to that larger transformation project?
Yeah, which I think, goes really well. So contrasting kind of these small, quick, nimble, but significant like solutions with, these ambitious investments, perhaps protracted endeavors. We have electronics health record modernization at Veterans Affairs, the rollout of the unique entry IDs by the General Service Administration, other, similar things that can become like maligned and the subjects of scrutiny and even tighter oversight. To those kind of, could be hackers who are operating under a microscope with that pressure, what guidance do you have for them?
I think it's really like when you're within those multi-year plans, what people need is faith that they're going to work. And I think we'd say the longer that any of those plans goes on without showing any sort of tangible milestone results along the way, the less likely it is to ever succeed. And so if you want to help that project succeed,
I know I'm personally waiting on bated breath. Wouldn't be, a Zoom conversation if we didn't have mild hiccups that we ourselves troubleshoot and work through as we wait for Marina to finish what I'm sure was, the most resplendent of responses. Nick, do you have kind of guidance for those under fire?
Yeah, just building on Marina, I too am waiting with bated breath on what she's going to say. But I'm a big fan of, can you break it down or do smaller pieces and show momentum? Because I think that can actually help with the oversight. I mean, because oftentimes this increased level of oversight is about a trust issue, right? And that whether it's in the executive branch or the legislative branch, not trusting that things are going to work. And the more that you can show in smaller pieces that something is going to work, or that you have tried something and it's not working, I think that's again why we end up with more and more layers of oversight, is because it takes longer and longer for that feedback cycle to, we like to kind of fail sometimes at a very large scale in big projects on a multi-year time scale, when in fact people working on some of those projects know that it's failing, right? And there's just not the incentives to kind of have that conversation with the oversight bodies for various reasons, right?
And just as like you have those kind of moments of recognition of maybe not failure but faltering, or room for change, room for improvement, looking at the individual, which is really the subject and perspective from which this book is written. What if someone were to say employ a tactic and that it just backfires on them, they run into a roadblock or it doesn't go out as intended? Are there some of like risks inherent in employing these tactics, and kind of how can you work to mitigate them or counteract one tactic with another?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think making change is about taking risks. But none of us got into public service just to kind of continue, as it is I think we're all motivated to give back and motivated about impact, right? And so at a certain point, we see things that we want to change, and so how can you understand your organization? How can you understand the mission, the culture? Yes, even the rules and the people. and then advocate for the kind of change that gets the organization comfortable with change, right? And so not everything you try is going to work. Marina and I have tons of failures, more of my failures than hers in the book. I think there's me getting thrown out of the White House Science Fair, me getting shut down from testifying when I was at the FCC because I hadn't briefed the Office of Legislative Affairs and was sneaking around on the Hill. So like all of those kinds of, there's plenty of failure in the book, and there's plenty of failure in making change. But there's a lot of lessons and growth that come from that, and that's really what we're talking about is experimentation and learning. We have a whole chapter about starting small and building. We talk about experimentation culture, and you know, where is your agency on that spectrum of is it just talking about experimentation, or is it actually using the data from experiments to drive programmatic decisions and real decisions at scale? And I think that's where those are the most exciting experimentation cultures in government.
And I think that was a great tee up by Nick to bring it back to Marina. So we kind of went down the lane of, you know, failure or faltering for a large scale project. Then we kind of like looked inwardly at like you, the individual, and kind of when you employ a tactic and it falters, and how you kind of like deal with the risks and fallout of that, and then brought it back again to kind of the larger picture. So we'll re-bring it back to you and your point before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think bureaucracies have a tendency to believe that the way to be successful is to plan every last possible detail out, right? Like the VA, when I was there, had its 18th attempt at the idea that a veteran should be able to update their mailing address in one place. And all 17 prior attempts looked exactly the same, which was they were going to make spreadsheets for years and years and years of exactly what data elements every different database required for updating your mailing address. And then they were going to synthesize all of these 83 different things and then, you know, magically have a solution after 10 years. But 17 of them did not work, right? And the thing that did work was doing one at a time. So the first success wasn't updating your mailing address in 83 places. It was updating it in 2 places once, you know? And so finding ways that you can help your organization make small wins of any kind, whatever they're measuring as a win, whatever they're measuring for success, help them see how a real user is interacting with it, help them see how they can, you know, connect the first thing, have the first web page, have the first plain language template, whatever it may be, can go a really, really, really long way towards getting political capital and trust and buy-in when you're working on one of these huge, scary, very, very risk-averse projects.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, balancing risk awareness and not verging into risk aversion. And then going back to what Nick, you were saying, that experimental culture, you know, this book is written from the perspective of and for impassioned individuals, but it's situated like within bureaucracies. What I appreciate is that bureaucracies tend to conjure a lot of negative connotations, but I see, you know, your usage of the term in the book pretty matter-of-factly and neutrally, really. But if we were to go kind of one step further in the spectrum, what are the hallmarks of a positive bureaucracy? You know, and especially if in a federal agency, one that is open and receptive to the hacking of its individuals.
I think one that solicits ideas for change, both from employees, but also from external stakeholders, both traditional stakeholders, as well as the general public and non-traditional voices. So an agency that isn't doing that just as a show mechanism, but is actually acting upon that data and investigating those ideas and trying to triage them, vet them, really understand if those are the kinds of things that are going to materially help that agency deliver more effectively, more efficiently, you know, achieve mission better, faster, what have you. So that's one big thing for me is how much is the organization actually listening and then trying to act upon what it hears. And then the other piece would be the experimentation culture of is it really doing experiments and is it really abiding by them? And I think the final bit would be around talent. is bureaucracies that not only promote from within, but also take great talent from externally and find ways to plug it in. And I've been privileged to be a part of some bureaucracies that did that, or helped some bureaucracies do that. And I helped start the Presidential Innovation Fellows program. More recently, I've helped start the U.S. Digital Corps. These are both programs to bring in technologists and entrepreneurial talent into government. And I think organizations that kind of understand the power of people flow, whether it's people flowing in or people flowing out into externships or other sabbatical programs, I'm just a huge, big fan of.
I'm going to make a bold claim, which is I think every bureaucracy can be hacked some of the time. And, our book has, over 50 tactics. All of them will not work anywhere, but some of them will work everywhere. And so it's about kind of understanding where you are. And in a way, the more formulaic and prescriptive bureaucracy is, the more you might be able to co-opt that process in and of itself and use the bureaucracy against itself by changing the form or the rule or using the process to change it, which is a very, very, very underlooked way of making really lasting change. We've seen so many people tempted to change a bureaucracy by looking for exceptions, looking for a workaround, or trying to do it in the dark of night, hoping that nobody will catch them. You're going to get caught, and you're going to make sure that nobody after you ever gets to use that loophole again. So really something we try to get across in the book is that you need to make your changes stick in a way that the bureaucracy sees and respects. And in that way, you can make your bureaucracy better, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of broken down, interrogated a little bit that bureaucracy portion of the title, let's look at a hack. And, this may be semantics, but we're going for it. When looking at a term like a bureaucracy hacker, and, I think of related descriptors, silo buster, disruptor, break things, move fast. That's empowering to some people, but it's also potentially uncomfortable for others to take on. And, it's an entitlement to some extent. I think about a quote from a previous Author Talks book, Sid Harrell's A Civic Technologist Practice Guide, where she writes, remember that every change you push means someone has to deal with a disruption of their work. So when you talk about making things stick, what about the considerations and competencies that are there for responsible hacking and mindful hacking of kind of what you're going to leave in your wake?
Absolutely. So we have a chapter in the book called, Remember Employee Needs. And I think this is a really critical bureaucracy hack that's also really often overlooked. If you want to change something that's going to impact end users, you have to think about, and not just think about, but deeply know how that's going to change the internal workload, because people will come after you in ways you may not expect because they're simply afraid of how it will change their authority or their job. I think we saw this with cloud computing a lot in government, where everybody was like, hey, it's going to save so much money. Websites won't have business hours anymore, right? It's going to be so great. But if you're the team that has overseen the server room for 20 or 30 years, you're now a GS 15, or maybe you're a 14, right? And you're looking forward to that 15 promotion. Being told you can go take an AWS class and get a certification and be a beginner after you've just been an expert in your career for your entire career, that's really threatening. That's like if you told me starting tomorrow, I have to do my career in Portuguese and I don't speak Portuguese. And so I think it's overlooked to celebrate some of the possible wins of a change and not really appreciate how it's going to impact the people on the inside. And you have to plan for that, or your change will get throttled, not because the insiders are necessarily evil or they don't want to see end users impacted, but it's a real big ask of someone to ask someone to give up their expertise and their job to, make your change. So you have to think about how that impacts.
I will say,
just
go for it, Nick. Sorry.
Go ahead, Emma. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna quick aside. I love points on cloud computing, and I was just gonna plug. We also run an IBM cloud computing series, where a big thing that we talk about is, it's not the technology so much as it is the people, it is the processes. It's about thinking about that on-prem to, cloud service provider hybrid model, what are you doing with the people? How are you retraining? How you're integrating workforces. So super love that point. But that was just our aside/partnership plug. Nick, back to you.
Yeah, we talk a little bit in the opening of the book about bureaucracies, and the rules were instituted for a reason, right? And that maybe just back to this definition of a bureaucracy is there are subject matter experts, there are officials, and there are defined processes. And so whether that's acquisition, whether you're buying stuff, whether it's around hiring, whether whatever the mission and the function, whether it could be regulatory, if you're making rules and you're trying to adjudicate things, right? Whatever that mission of that agency, there is a desire for that to be done equitably and fairly, right? And so a lot of the rules stem from that, and whoever wrote those rules was just as smart or smarter than you, probably. And they thought about it and they did their best. And so, here you come, if you are using one of those hack or disruptor kind of names, and just recognize that those rules made a lot of sense, more sense than you may recognize at that time. And so this question of blowing up the bureaucracy is something that we actually react pretty negatively to, because we think that you got to understand where those rules came from. Understand, are they water cooler rules, or are they ones that are written down in stone? But you know what? These are all human organizations. The rules didn't come down from Mount Sinai on a tablet. Like, they're all changeable. And so we talk about this idea of relaxing fixed constraints in the book. And yes, some things may be statutory, some things may be written by Congress, but that doesn't mean they can't be changed. And it's just starting to kind of build the crescendo of why things need to be changed, with full recognition of why they started the way they were.
Yeah, and I think that point of learning by doing, and the salience is just as much of learning by listening. Looking at that kind of like third now part of your title, we've got bureaucracy, we've got the hacking, that kind of no matter what your role, and like being on any team. I love that there's these kind of like universal tactics, but when we're looking in a federal context, how would you check for these competencies, these mindfulness, this inclusivity and inclusive design? How do you expect that to kind of like scale or map onto things that, like, we know of, like a USA Jobs entry level applicant versus a senior executive service candidate versus someone who's vying to be a political appointee and is being reviewed by the board?
I think I look for similar qualities across them, which is I want to hear stories of how they got something done. And if you're entry level, maybe that was, making a small change at your college or in your high school or in your community. And if you're a political SES, I expect to hear a slightly more, complicated answer. But I want to hear, tell me a story of something that you've changed. I want to hear how you knew what change was the right change. And I want to hear how you would decide if you were successful at making that change, which would lead it to, like, how are they measuring things? Are they going out and talking to real people? Or if they tell me, I read the Gartner quadrant and, that's all, and then I wrote a report and that's how I made a change, that's probably not the change agent that I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I think that segues really well into this idea of talking to real people, meaningful engagement. You point out that some of the feedback mechanisms that exist in governments and nonprofits and similar organizations, like focus groups and surveys, while helpful, they can fail to capture kind of the entire view, a holistic view of user experiences and individuals who are prospective users or ones that drop off or kind of withdraw for some reason. As agencies kind of, continue to socialize and heed last year's customer experience executive order, the president management's agenda's priority area on customer service, how can agencies use this to facilitate more of that meaningful, holistic vantage point, as opposed to just kind of becoming a check the box rote measurement with like, well, now we'll just do all these focus groups and all these surveys?
Oh boy, I have a lot of thoughts on this one. So I think we got to encourage our leaders or wherever, and also regular employees. We have to encourage everybody to get out of the building and actually understand how real employees or end users are experiencing their service. Because I think, back in the day for feds that have been around a little while, we had portfolio stat, right? And they were going to measure how many server rooms we shut off. And so everybody just took their servers and put them in bigger rooms. So the number of rooms got smaller, right? So I think you also really have to think about perverse incentives. If I'm going to start measuring X, what steps could be taken that aren't in service of my goal that will still arrive at X, and how could I add in a countermeasure to that? But I really think the more that you get people out and talking to real users, observing them really, out wherever they are experiencing it, and also to the extent possible, experiencing their service. I once did a workshop on innovation for a state. The state shall remain nameless. And it was a state's transportation authority employee leaders. And I made them ride the bus and meet me at a location that they had to take the bus to. And none of them had ever ridden the bus before. And they were mad. They couldn't figure out what bus to get on. They couldn't figure out it. And it was very eye-opening to them, though, right? Because they had never actually tried their experience. And so we can.
I think Marina's breaking up a little bit, but I think the sentiment is incredibly resonant. That idea, undercover boss in it, if you will, to put it in the most kind of commercialized of terms. But that idea of you gotta use the service product to know it and to really understand it. Nick, kind of any points on, this rote form of customer experiences versus this immersive, truly understanding, encapsulating one?
Yeah, so I love this idea of get out of the office. I love this idea of mystery shopping. I also think that we have to get outside of the government or federal bubble, so to speak, right? So, we're so focused on what happens when people come into the office of a federal office, or what happens when they call in, or what happens when they come on a federal website. But, most of the searches of people looking for federal services are actually happening on Google and Bing, and in Uber and Lyft when they're trying to get to a particular office, right? And so understanding that people are looking for and trying to do transactions outside of the government system, I think is super important as well. That just speaks to meeting people where they are and understanding how their lives are, and this works regardless of what level you are. And you can use that qualitative data. I mean, you can use that quantitative data where you're looking at what people are looking for, what people are saying, what they're commenting, what they're saying on social media. You can use that kind of quantitative data to spark those kinds of investigations where you are trying to experience it yourself, or you have someone mystery shop for you, or you're simply going out and asking open-ended questions, kind of using that user-centered design principles of not presuming the answer. And the more that you kind of tug on those questions, and you just kind of keep going down a path, I think you'll learn a ton. It may be for a particular segment that your agency isn't serving as well. Just as one example, there was kind of a general conception at the VA that older veterans probably were less tech savvy, and there's a general conception in federal government that we should build mobile apps, and we should actually have more responsive websites, which mean mobile responsive websites, which means essentially that on your cell phone, if you go to your browser, you go to the particular website of the federal agency, and it would size and be appropriate for that browser, but the building a dedicated app was considered not as inclusive or not great practice. But one of the things that some of my students at the Kennedy School and Harvard College did was they worked with the VA to actually understand the various veteran experiences And they realized that a mobile app, a dedicated mobile app, would make sense because people are constantly coming back and checking their claim status and constantly looking at benefits. And something that maybe solved those identity problems would make sense. And so the VA has actually recently launched a dedicated native mobile app, and they've done it really centered in the experiences of veterans and built it with that as their North Star. And so it's very highly reviewed in the app stores, and it's gaining a lot of traction. So it's an example of if you center things in what people really need, and you kind of keep coming back and checking your assumptions, both quantitatively and qualitatively, that can help you course correct as your idea evolves.
Yeah, something that, I've found in conversations though with customer experience and evaluation user research officers is that, they feel a pressure to derive and, discern these super profound insights that you have to completely remove or create a new one or radically transform a product or service, when instead they're finding these more subtle, more nuanced kind of findings of how people use. So they want to adjust language a little bit, add a budding versus like prototyping something new. How can we, for those joining who are agency leaders, or perhaps like us with the Partnership for Public Service, civil storytellers and cheerleaders, champion both these kind of subtle improvements and these radical reforms? And how do we temper expectations when people want or think that they want one versus the other?
I think we can all do a better job of holding up these stories as success stories, even if it's a seemingly small change. And we have to think of the big changes as really just made up of the small changes. You don't get to totally blow up your thing with a new thing. I mean, you can maybe, but it won't work. But really, the new thing is composed of 50 or 100 small changes to the existing thing to understand what you need to change. So I think we could all, we should have some blog posts, right? Like the 10 best form changes of 2022 with Sammys associated to them. Because so often the small change is really what has a huge impact on the end user.
I will pitch it to our Sammy's team, watch out 2023, the formies, the pre-show to the Sammys. But, something that, I'm also thinking about is not just kind of, these small, nimble, individual kind of people being able to go out into these spaces, but, there are also teams of just armies of one. They don't have the ability to immerse themselves, because if they were to do that, then anything else that was come through would get neglected. The book opens with the story of finding your paperclip, outlining how you, Marina, as a newly appointed Chief Technology Officer, demonstrated value to garner trust and access and resources, and only then were you able to pivotally get to employees. It resonated with conversations I've had about individuals who can't convince them to add more personnel to staff up. What advice do you give to those that just need more bodies in place?
I think Nick has crushed this. So I think he has the better answer here. And I really learned from him a great deal on this. But, rather than starting with 75 full-time career civil servant positions, can you start with one? Could you start with one detailee? Could you find your guild among other people and start growing your team from people that are already there to start showing the value? One thing my team did out of sheer desperation, but it ended up working out very well, was training the security guards at the VA and how to code HTML, because we had to move a whole bunch of pages over in order to get some budget. And we didn't have the time and we didn't have the bodies, but they were there, right? And had computers. So, and then they ended up all leaving the VA and now work in IT. So oops, but Nick has a lot of great stories here.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, a lot of slack in large organizations. And so part of it is understanding how to get people excited about your idea, however small it is at first, so that some of them may just provide feedback, but there's also a class of folks who are doers. Maybe they're more junior. Maybe they want to get into your organization or field. Maybe they want to help you out because you've helped them out considerably. And so, you know, can you recruit some doers to help you? And so this idea of building an informal team, Karas, as we like to call it, this informal team, and some of them will be over time, people maybe in your organization, but there are other people in adjacent groups who may be able to help you out, or there may be external stakeholders that within the rules of federal government are able to advance the idea and so forth. And so we're big fans of that. Marina, when she started at the VA, despite being a direct report to the secretary and the CTO of and now it's 400,000 people, you know, Fortune 10 enterprise, she had no one reporting to her. For a good part of my White House career, I had 0 employees, and then I had a few. And so like this and I never had any budget. So this idea of and we both were privileged to serve in fairly senior roles, which came with some soft power. And so we talk a lot about how to employ that soft power. But we've seen great policy entrepreneurs and other public sector entrepreneurs, bureaucracy hackers who have started at the bottom and have gotten others excited about what they are doing and have looked to help out. I mean, if you look at the start of the U.S. Digital Corps, one of the co-founders, Chris Kwong, you know, he's just starting out his career, and yet he's co-founded a program to bring early career technologists into government, and this year there's 40 of them across, I think, 13 federal agencies. And it's an example of someone who was able to relax fixed constraints, right? Who was able to say, hey, you don't need to be an SES to start a program, right? You just need to get enough people excited and get enough mutual excitement to get something started, and then you can start to build some momentum.
And I love that. I love that idea of, you know, the non-permanent alternatives that you can then use to eventually make your case. You said detailees, they're volunteers, fellows, Harvard Kennedy School students, people doing tours of duty. So let's say you do that, you build your momentum, you're finally at that point where it's like, you have the case. What is in that one-page pitch when it's like, I need to bring these people on full time? This is the return on investment that you get from having a dedicated team focusing on these things.
I think you have to tie it to mission, right? It's got to ultimately not be about expanding your fiefdom, but it has to be about something that the agency is excited about and is consistent with accomplishing its mission and its political goals. If you're not speaking that language, then you're even if your project is quite small, you ought to be thinking about how it aligns with the more senior objectives and both mission and back office objectives that an agency's got.
Yeah, along those lines, you want to understand who's going to make the decision and how they're going to make it. Something that worked a lot at the VA, for example, was like there was budget dollars aligned to healthcare, for example, right? Which is a pretty big bucket. And so if I could align my need to healthcare, then that helped. If I could align my need to reducing the footprint of VA hospitals, then I was like, yeah, if we build online pharmacy, that'll reduce the footprint of waiting rooms. So that's how we can achieve, you know, if you help me get some employees. You may also have opportunities where you can borrow or even have other people's headcount. If you make some sort of a barter that is of interest to them. And it could be even that the entire time I was at the VA, my team actually technically reported to somebody else. And I just, in exchange for writing the, you know, performance reviews and doing all the actual managing, someone else with a very, very large headcount was willing to sort of let me borrow those slots. Charles, my successor, has, I believe, changed that. But, you know, you can get a lot done within, and that was within the rules. People have like dotted line reporting all the time. So.
Yeah. And, you know, I think also the general landscape has become more flexible around hiring direct hire authorities, you know, using a subject matter expert assessments as opposed to kind of the typical process. You know, these are a lot of kind of new possibilities born out of necessity with the pandemic. You know, how have, you know, other tactics and examples, what new kind of, you know, windows are there as government has kind of adjusted to this new reality?
I think Nick made some, right, with Digital Core?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite examples, and I don't want to bore the audience with it, but the U.S. Digital Core is a great example of so it's an early career 2-year federal fellowship. I think something close to 1,000 people applied, and now we have 40 fellows, and hope to go much bigger. And I hope all the feds who are participating today apply and talk to the program office at GSA. Caitlin Gandhi and Chris Kwong are the two co-founders there. So it's a great example of people flow and kind of one of the tactics we talk about, act as if. You know, there's a number of areas they're recruiting for, including data analysis, product design, cybersecurity. And then actually, it's one final point that I wanted to make sure that we hit on is that you know, you may be in a particular guild. It could be a technical area like that. It could be in HR or program management, et cetera. But it's really getting to build friends with people in other guilds. That's where some of your superpowers lie. So if you are in service delivery, getting to partner with the finance and budget folks can be super powerful. And you know, it's funny, if you talk to CIOs, and I talk to a lot of federal CIOs, and I ask them, especially when they leave, like, what's the one thing that you wish you had known? And they usually point to the budget process, especially for new CIOs who come in and do a tour of duty, you know, like a political appointee. They say, I wish I'd mastered the budget process earlier in my tenure as the CIO of a large cabinet agency or something like that. So this idea of not only understanding your guild, but then trying to understand and work with people in other functions, I think is just you'll be more effective in your organization, and you'll ultimately be able to bring subject matter expertise to that other function. So I'm a big fan of cross-functional teams and working with other functions.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Marina.
And building on that, something I've seen work really well as you're building out your guild is giving away the credit. Like if let's say you found an answer of how to do something, but you needed to scale and you can't scale it yourself, hiring a new team to do that may be the way to scale it. But another way to scale it may be, can you package this up in a way that other people can repeat and they can get the success and the credit for it? This is a lot of my foster care work now, which is foster care is state-based, right? So could I go to 53 states and do it myself? Maybe, but that's pretty slow and not very scalable. But if I can do it somewhere once as a reference implementation and package that up and then let other people go and get the wins, then we all accomplish the goal and we get there a lot faster. So that's another way to use a guild for good.
Yeah.
Giving credit liberally, right?
Of course. Always have your name, you know, in the dotted line in the subtext. But you both speak to just the power of convening. And I think in the book, there's reference to how do you like get people together, and grilled cheeses was the answer for one of them. So can you speak a little to that? And then, you know, recognizing in 2022 that getting people around and having grilled cheeses may not be as feasible. What are some of the virtual hybrid ways that guilds are still convening and finding one another?
Yeah, the Grilled Cheese Club was something we started at the VA, which was we broke probably many fire rules by using George Foreman grills to make grilled cheeses in our office and invite people, our guild members from all over, to come and just casually hear what we were up to so that they were armed with information. So when they were in a meeting, when we weren't there, they knew what we were up to. They could answer questions. They could perhaps propose solutions that were relevant back to the things that we were working on. So just finding ways to get people informally together. And I thought the Zooms were going to be pretty bad for this during the pandemic. And I would say I've been surprised to the point that I now have really good working relationships with people that I have never met before. And so I think that there's still time, and it's all about still those like one-on-one relationships. It's not about an 80-person Zoom where you talk at people. It's about the back channel, right? The texting with someone or getting a one-on-one Zoom with them or asking how their kids are or whatever it may be to build a real relationship, not a transactional one, so that you can sort of like make progress together through good times and hard times.
Yeah. Speaking of trying to reduce talking at people, we have time if anyone has any kind of questions that they want to pose, but I will ask, while we wait for potentially people to chime in, what are some of the guilds that you find yourselves in right now? What are the ones that are engaging you, energizing you, prompting you forward?
We're going to work on our who goes first. We're going to work on that. Something I'm really excited about in foster care is, as I mentioned, foster care is state-based, right? So it's something that needs to be done 53 times. And if you're saying there aren't 53 states, it's because there's DC and Guam, et cetera, that also have foster care systems. And so there's this really wonderful guild of people who have connections to maybe 3 or 4 states here and 3 or 4 states there. And we found ways to have a shared goal and then to really divide and conquer in the work and say, like, I'm going to go work with Washington State and someone's going to go work with New Hampshire and someone's going to go work with Montana and then kind of loop back. And so that's a guild I'm really honored to be a part of. And I'm really excited about what it can accomplish.
Yeah, I'm part of the Venture Capital Guild and passionate about bringing modern software to government. It's something that I talk a lot about, and that I think we tend to buy too much services and people rather than modern software as a way to empower our people to kind of make those continuous changes. So it's something I'm super passionate about. But the other guild that people may not realize I'm a part of is a lot of these software companies have sales organizations, and they have federal sales organizations who are working to understand the problem and educate the agents, propose how their software fits into the mission or into the back office function. And we talk about in the book how there's this interesting parallel between enterprise sales processes and bureaucracy hacking, because at the end of the day, qualifying your time and really understanding, are you adding value, and creating the business case and creating the momentum, the consensus, overcoming the objections, that's all actually a selling process, right? And so, we tend to sometimes have negative connotations of selling, but the best change agents inside of an organization are selling. They're selling a vision to other people, to people in charge of resources, to external stakeholders and oversight. I mean, the best startup entrepreneurs who I get to work with, they're selling vision too, and they're just trying to attract, capital and employees and customers. And it's the same thing inside of an organization. So I'm part of this sales guild, which I think is sometimes underappreciated in public service, and we definitely have engagement functions, which are super important in how we kind of go out and solicit and get feedback. But as we make changes, that's fundamentally a selling job. It's an entrepreneurship job inside a pretty complicated context. So, count me a part of that guild.
I really appreciate that perspective, that sales perspective. Calling in, one of the questions we have in the chat, what about, someone operating as a contract worker? They have a lot of insight, a lot of opportunity, but, they also have unique constraints by their role. What does hacking look like for them?
I think a lot of the tactics still apply, but the way that you apply them may certainly be different. We've heard from a number of contractors, for example, that actually use the contract itself as a way to drive change. Like they'll add in bullet points for diversity goals, or they'll add in measurements like KPIs or customer satisfaction or et cetera scores that maybe everybody else sort of just glosses over and doesn't really notice. But then once you win the contract, right, then you're held to deliver on them. So that can be one possible change venue. You probably won't be able to sneak in a controversial bullet there, but you could sneak in some seemingly harmless bullets. And I think you can also be an incredible change agent as an outside if you find your partners on the inside that want to accomplish the same goal, because they desperately need partners on the outside, right? Like everyone inside an organization can want a goal, but if they're very contractor heavy, as many federal agencies tend to be, they can't do that alone. They need, outside contractor friends as partners, as part of their guild to get to success. And so understanding the risks and frameworks of partners and trying to be a team member. I think there's a lot of handoff with contract relationships that isn't particularly healthy. It's like tossing the requirements over the wall. And that's not a legal requirement, right? Well, very, very rarely maybe, but not one. So don't be held to artificial constraints. You can talk to your inside partners and understand their goals and like reimagine things. You don't have to just exchange Excel spreadsheets of requirements and leave it at that.
Yeah, we tell the story of Kessel Run, which is the Air Force software factory, and we tell the founding story. But when you walk the halls of Kessel Run, which is actually in a WeWork in Boston, unless it's the day when they wear the uniforms, which I think is Wednesdays, all the other days everyone's in t-shirt and jeans, and you can't tell the officers from the Air Force civilians from the contractors. And they're all working together side by side. I guess the other point I'd make is picking up the pen is a great tactic. And whether you are a contractor or whether you are a Fed, so much of what we do requires things to be documented. And if you can do that on your own behalf or helping your agency customer, you're able to accomplish that much more. So if you're in the policy context, that's ghostwriting, speeches and providing talking points and bullets. But if you're in another function, there's definitely opportunities to kind of pick up the pen and make it easy for the other person.
Yeah, and I will say from the partnership perspective, I've been privy to a lot of conversations with federal leaders who emphasize that they want their contractors, they want their vendor teams, they want those individuals to embed themselves, to integrate themselves and be full team members, whether it's, cloud service providers working together for ensuring cloud security within their infrastructure, or it's, people coming in to help with user research and putting those like clauses into the contracts to make sure that there's user research compensation so that they're reaching out to diverse individuals. So definitely just want to underscore everything that Marina and Nick said, but then also say that, partnership is here in it too. So with that, I think, we had such an enriching conversation. I can say that I am walking away with perhaps too many tactics. I'll have to, digest and pick one to start on. But I want to thank you, Marina and Nick, so much. And to everyone who attended for being a part of our guild. You are welcome to engage with the partnership and with us just as you'd like. So thank you for joining us. And for those interested in purchasing a copy of Hack Your Bureaucracy, coming out September 13th, an inspiring beach read as we near these last weeks of summer, please see the link to the book's site in the chat. Thank you again, and we hope to see you at future Author Talks conversations. Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for having us. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Emma.